In the endless silence of space, far beyond the known trade routes and peaceful colonies, something small and fragile drifted through the dark. It was a signal, weak and fading but alive, a cry for help that had crossed more distance than anyone could imagine. It came from a lonely planet on the edge of a dying star system, where the Volari people once lived in light and harmony. Their world had been beautiful, silver oceans, glowing forests, and crystal cities that sang when the wind touched them. But beauty could not save them when the sky fell. One by one, the stars above them burst with fire as asteroids rained down without warning. The Volari had no defenses, no powerful fleets, no allies strong enough to come to their rescue. Within days, their cities turned into ruins and their songs into silence. The survivors gathered in underground shelters, trying to save whatever remained. Food was almost gone. Their power systems were dying and hope was breaking apart like their world above. The planet's communication network had been destroyed, but one small outpost still worked. A single transmitter stood among the broken rocks, its antenna bent, its lights flickering. From there, a tired Volari engineer named Selen tried one last time to send a message. Her hands trembled as she entered the code, her voice shaking as she spoke into the microphone. "This is the Volari colony of Lysara," she said, her tone half whisper, half prayer. "We have suffered catastrophic damage. Our cities are lost. We are dying. Please, if anyone can hear us, help us." Her words were carried by the wind of the void, beyond her system into the unknown. The signal was faint, swallowed by the cosmic background noise. Yet she kept sending it again and again, day after day, until her voice cracked and the transmitter overheated. She fixed it with her bare hands and kept going. Around her, the remaining Volari watched with hollow eyes. Some told her to stop, that no one was listening, that the universe had already forgotten them. But Selen refused. "Even if no one answers," she said softly, "the stars will know we tried." Weeks passed. The outpost grew colder, its energy core weakening. Many Volari fell ill, some never waking up. The air smelled of dust and burnt circuits. Selen's voice became hoarse from repeating the message. She didn't know that across the galaxy. Her voice had finally found ears that could hear. On a faraway world, blue and alive with oceans and storms, a Terran Alliance deep space listening post stood under an artificial dome. Inside, hundreds of receivers hummed as they scanned every frequency in the universe. The humans who worked there were used to hearing strange signals, pulsars, alien music, and static whispers. But that night something unusual came through. A young technician named Mara was sipping her coffee when her console blinked with a strange rhythm. She frowned and leaned closer. It wasn't random noise. It repeated. Slow, steady, almost like a heartbeat. She adjusted the filters and enhanced the signal. Then she heard it. A voice, faint, broken, but real. The translation software struggled to make sense of it, but a few words appeared on her screen. "Help us." "Volari colony, dying." Mara froze. For a moment she thought it was a glitch. There were millions of signals in deep space. But when she listened again, she could hear something else in that voice. Fear, exhaustion, and a strange, human-like sadness. She called her supervisor, who came rushing to her station. Together they checked the coordinates, and what they found shocked them. The signal was coming from a sector long thought to be empty. No known colonies, no active civilizations, nothing but space dust and silence. Yet the SOS was real. It repeated every 23 minutes, steady as a heartbeat. Mara sat there, unable to look away from the screen. She imagined the people behind that signal, waiting, praying, dying. Over the next few hours, the message spread through the listening networks. Scientists and analysts worked without rest, trying to decode it more clearly. They managed to extract a short video fragment. A dimly lit alien face, eyes wide with desperation, surrounded by darkness. The image was blurry but unmistakably intelligent. The Volari were real and they were pleading for help. The news reached the Terran Council within the day. Some officials said it was impossible to help. The distance was too great, the risks too high. Others argued that humanity had a duty to respond. But while the leaders debated, the message kept playing, echoing through every receiver across the human colonies. People everywhere heard it, in starships, on mining worlds, even on Earth itself. Some cried, others whispered prayers for the strangers across the stars. Humanity had always dreamed of not being alone. Now they were being asked to prove what that meant. Back on the Volari world, Selen was running out of time. The last of the power cells were failing. Her skin was pale from hunger, and her hands shook each time she reached for the controls. Still, she didn't stop. Her friend Darrell tried to take her away, saying there was no point anymore. But she pushed his hand aside gently. "There is always a point," she murmured, "as long as someone might be listening." That night, the sky above the shattered planet flashed with lightning, strange storms born from dust and radiation. The sound of thunder rolled through the broken valleys. Celine sat in the darkness of the outpost, watching the signal light blink one more time. She smiled weakly, her eyes closing for a moment. "Please," she whispered to the stars, "let someone hear us." At that same moment, billions of kilometers away, Mara leaned forward in her chair, her heart pounding. The signal was getting stronger. Her screen filled with clearer words now, coordinates, identification codes, and the same plea repeated over and over. She didn't know who they were, or how humanity could reach them. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was not a dream. Someone was out there, someone was waiting. She stood and said quietly to her team, "We've got a live distress call from a real world. They're still alive." And with those words, everything changed. The message that began as a fading whisper in the cold had finally reached ears that could understand it. Across the Terran systems, hearts awakened with something powerful, compassion mixed with curiosity, courage mixed with fear. For centuries, humans had looked at the stars and wondered if anyone was out there. Now they knew. Someone was calling. Someone needed them. And humanity, known as the Deathworlders, fierce, emotional, unpredictable, had just heard the universe cry for help. That night, the Terran listening post recorded one final version of the SOS before it faded completely. The sound was faint, but Mara saved it on her personal device and listened again and again. It wasn't just a distress call anymore. To her, it felt like the voice of the cosmos itself, fragile, lonely, and full of hope. She whispered softly, as if answering the voice, "We hear you." And somewhere, light years away on the dying Valari world, a flicker of life still remained in the transmitter's fading glow, as if the stars themselves were waiting to see what the Deathworlders would do next. When the faint alien signal reached Earth's communication center, it spread like wildfire across the Terran colonies. Scientists, soldiers, and ordinary people all talked about the same thing, a desperate SOS echoing from a lost world. Every channel repeated the message. It wasn't a dream or a fake transmission. It was real. Someone out there was dying, and they had called for help. Humanity, however, was no ordinary race in the galaxy. They were known as the Deathworlders, beings from a planet so dangerous that even their animals could kill. To most peaceful civilizations, humans were seen as unpredictable, emotional, and sometimes frightening. They were warriors, survivors, and explorers. But to themselves, they were something more, protectors who carried both fire and mercy in their hearts. Inside the Great Hall of the Terran Council, the highest leaders gathered to decide what to do. The meeting was broadcast to every major colony. Maps of the galaxy floated in the air, showing the location of the distress call, deep in the uncharted zones, far beyond safe routes. The hall was filled with voices, arguments, and tension. Some wanted to go, others wanted to stay out of it. Admiral Reyes, a tall man with silver hair and calm eyes, stood near the center table. He had fought in many wars and seen the worst sides of humanity. Yet when he listened to that broken voice from space, something inside him stirred. He remembered the faces of refugees he had once saved from pirate attacks. He remembered the look of hope in their eyes when the human fleet arrived. He understood what it meant to be helpless and alone. One of the council members spoke sharply. "We don't know who they are. This could be a trap. The galaxy is full of unknown powers." Another added, "It's too far. Even if we send a ship, it could take weeks. We cannot risk lives for strangers." The room filled with murmurs of agreement. But Admiral Reyes did not move. He looked at the map, then at the faces of the people arguing. "You are afraid," he said quietly. His voice cut through the noise like a blade. "But fear has never stopped us before. Every time we stepped into the dark, we found something worth saving. If this is a trap, we will face it. If it's a plea for help, We must answer it. The council fell silent. Then the chairwoman asked, "And if we lose ships? If we lose lives?" Reyes took a slow breath and replied, "Then we lose them for the right reason. If we can hear suffering and do nothing, then we are no longer human." Those words spread beyond the hall. People watching the broadcast repeated them, sharing them on every network. Soldiers quoted them in their barracks. Pilots whispered them in hangars. Across human space, hearts began to beat with pride and purpose. Humanity had always been divided by borders and politics, but when someone asked for help, truly asked, they remembered who they were. The council voted that night. The result was close, but the answer was yes. Humanity would send help. Not a small scouting team, but a fleet, a full rescue operation. The mission was called Operation Dawnreach. It was not a mission of war, but of compassion. In the following days, the fleet began to gather. Massive. Carriers, hospital ships, research vessels, and destroyers assembled in Earth's orbit. The sight was breathtaking. Hundreds of ships gleaming under the sunlight, their hulls marked with the blue emblem of the Terran Alliance. Soldiers and engineers worked day and night, loading medical supplies, food crates, and rescue drones. Scientists uploaded data for planetary recovery systems. Mechanics double-checked engines and shields. Every person there felt they were part of something historic. Mara, the technician who had first heard the SOS, stood in the control deck of the main communications cruiser. She had been invited to join the mission as an observer. She couldn't believe how her life had changed in just a few days. One night she was listening to static, and now she was part of a fleet heading into the unknown. As the ship's engines roared, she whispered to herself, "We're coming," but not everyone was celebrating. Across the galaxy, other alien civilizations watched with suspicion. To them, the Deathworlders were a race of unpredictable giants who had survived everything their deadly planet threw at them: storms, plagues, wars. The Valari's signal had reached not only humanity but also other listening posts. Yet none of the peaceful species dared to answer. They believed the place was cursed. So when they saw the human fleet preparing for launch, their ambassadors sent messages of warning. "Terrans," one alien diplomat said in a broadcast, "you must not interfere. The unknown brings danger. You could awaken something beyond control." The reply from Earth was short and clear. "Then we will face it together." At dawn, the fleet launched. Earth's sky glowed with light as engines ignited, creating streaks of fire that reached beyond the clouds. Families gathered outside their homes looking up. Children waved at the passing ships. Old veterans saluted. Across colonies and orbital cities, people stood still and watched the sight, not of war but of hope. Inside the flagship Resolute, Admiral Reyes looked out the viewport at the endless stars. His crew was silent, focused. Each man and woman on board knew the risks. The uncharted space ahead was filled with hazards, asteroid fields, radiation belts, and possibly hostile life forms. Yet none of them hesitated. Before departure, Reyes gave one final speech. "We do not go because it is safe," he said. "We go because someone is alone, and we can make a difference. We go because that is what it means to be human. Let history remember this day, not for the weapons we carry, but for the mercy we choose." The crew applauded quietly. No shouting, no celebration, just a deep, shared resolve. The engines roared, and the stars stretched into lines as the fleet jumped into faster-than-light travel. Within seconds, they were gone, leaving behind a blue world filled with prayers and dreams. During the journey, Mara spent her time decoding the Valari language with the help of AI systems. The more she learned, the more she felt connected to the unknown survivors. Their message contained fragments of their culture, mentions of sky, gardens, light temples, and something they called the heart of Lysara. She wondered what kind of world they came from, what beauty they had lost. Meanwhile, Admiral Reyes and his officers studied maps of the region ahead. The coordinates pointed toward a part of the galaxy filled with debris and gravitational storms. It would be dangerous, but the fleet was ready. The humans had faced worse on their own home planet: volcanoes, hurricanes, predators, and war. Space was just another challenge to overcome. News reports followed the fleet's progress across human space. Everywhere, people cheered for them. Some made banners that said, "We heard you." Others lit candles at night facing the sky, whispering prayers for the strangers called Valari. In the halls of alien councils across the stars, there was silence. No other species dared to follow. They watched from afar, confused and amazed. One alien leader said to another, "They are not logical. They risk everything for those they have never met." The other replied softly, "Perhaps that is why they survive everything." Days turned into weeks as the fleet crossed the deep void. Their path was rough, their engines tested to the limit. One ship had to turn back after a reactor malfunction. Still, the others continued. Through every obstacle, they remembered Admiral Reyes's words, "If we can hear suffering and do nothing, then we are no longer human." Finally, after endless travel, they began to see faint traces of the Valari system. A dying star, broken planets, and the faint echo of the same signal that had started it all. Everyone on board fell silent as the sound filled their speakers. The SOS was still there, weaker now, but alive. Mara felt tears in her eyes. The Valari were still waiting. Somewhere down there, under the dust and ruins, someone was still hoping. She turned to Reyes and said, "We found them." He nodded slowly, his voice calm but full of emotion. "Then let's bring them home." And with that, humanity, the Deathworlders feared by many, misunderstood by all, began their descent toward the unknown world, not as conquerors, but as saviors answering a call from the heart of the universe. The human fleet moved like a line of silver lights cutting through the darkness of space. After weeks of travel, they finally reached the Valari system, the place where the SOS had come from. Everyone on board went silent as their screens lit up with the first images of the lost world. It was worse than they expected. The planet hung below them, half covered in dust clouds and broken land. Huge cracks split the surface and the oceans were dark and dry. Whole cities lay in ruins, shining faintly under the dying sun. It looked like a world that had already given up on life. Mara sat in front of her console, her eyes wide. The signal they had followed for so long was still there, but weak, just a faint heartbeat beneath the noise. She began to scan the surface, searching for its source. Slowly the coordinates appeared. There was life, faint energy readings, maybe a few thousand survivors scattered in underground shelters. It was enough. Humanity hadn't come too late. On the command bridge of the flagship Resolute, Admiral Reyes stood quietly, watching the planet through the wide glass window. Around him, his officers reported conditions: high radiation, unstable atmosphere, dangerous weather. But none of it mattered now. They were here for a reason. "Prepare landing teams," Reyes ordered. "We go down." The rescue ships detached from the fleet one by one, glowing like falling stars as they entered the planet's atmosphere. The descent was violent. Storms of dust and static lightning struck the hulls, shaking the dropships until the crews gripped their seats with white knuckles. Mara held onto her harness, her heart pounding. She had never seen anything like this. The world below looked angry, broken, almost alive. When they finally broke through the clouds, she saw the surface. Giant craters stretched for miles. Buildings had melted under heat. Rivers had turned to dry scars. The sky was dark with ash. Yet among all that destruction, there were small signs of hope. The faint glimmer of artificial lights buried deep underground. The dropship landed in a rocky valley near what used to be a Valari city. The air outside was thin and full of dust, but the soldiers wore protective suits. As the ramp opened, the humans stepped out onto alien soil. It was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no wind. Just the distant rumble of collapsing structures. They began searching for life signs. The scanners picked up something. Movement, heartbeat patterns below the surface. The team followed the signal and found a narrow tunnel hidden under a pile of stone. When they cleared it, a small door came into view, half broken and covered in strange symbols. Captain Idris, one of the mission leaders, knocked twice, hoping for a response. Nothing happened. Then he placed a hand on the door and spoke softly through the communicator. "We're not enemies. We came to help." For a long moment there was silence. Then slowly the door opened. From the darkness inside, a group of thin, pale figures stepped out. Their eyes were large and glowing faintly in the dim light. They looked afraid, too weak to stand properly. These were the Valari, survivors of a world that had almost ended. One of them, a woman with silver-blue skin, stared at the humans in disbelief. Her voice trembled when she spoke. "You heard us?" she asked in her language, which the translator quickly converted. Mara took a step forward, removing her helmet. The air stung her throat, but she didn't care. "Yes," she said softly. "We heard your call." The Valari looked at each other, some crying silently. A small child hiding behind the woman peeked out, his eyes wide with fear and wonder. He reached forward with trembling fingers, touching the smooth metal of Mara's glove. She knelt down and offered her hand. The child hesitated, then placed his small hand in hers. It was warm, delicate, alive. That moment, the first touch between two dying worlds, became something that history would never forget. The humans began their work immediately. Engineers set up clean air generators. Medics opened mobile clinics treating wounds and infections. Food and water were distributed. The Valari watched with astonishment as these tall, strong strangers moved through their ruined tunnels, fixing things that their own people had thought were lost forever. One old Valari, his face lined with age, whispered, "We thought no one would come. We thought the stars had gone silent." Admiral Reyes arrived later that day, walking among the survivors with quiet respect. When he looked at them, weak, frightened, but still breathing, he felt the weight of what humanity had done. They had crossed the galaxy for these lives. No one would ever call humans heartless again, but the planet was dangerous. The radiation from the asteroid storm still burned in some regions, and tremors shook the ground often. The rescue teams had to move fast. Reyes ordered the construction of temporary shelters above ground, using modular units from the ships. Within days, a small human Valari camp began to rise among the ruins. Mara helped a group of children learn how to use the portable water filters. They laughed when the clean water poured out, as if they had never seen anything so magical. The smallest girl pointed at the sky and asked what the bright shapes were. Mara smiled and told her they were ships, our homes in the stars. The girl nodded slowly and said, "They look like hope." In orbit, the fleet worked non-stop to scan the planet's surface. They discovered that the Valari civilization had once been advanced, with energy towers and glowing cities powered by the planet's core. But the asteroid storm had changed everything. Their energy lines were broken, their sky was poisoned. The humans couldn't rebuild it all, but they could give them a chance to live again. However, not everyone trusted the newcomers at first. Some Valari elders whispered among themselves that the Deathworlders might demand something in return. They had heard stories from other civilizations about humans being dangerous, but then they saw the way human medics treated their sick without asking for anything. They saw soldiers share their own rations. They saw engineers risking their lives to stabilize a collapsing tunnel just to save a few trapped Valari. The fear slowly began to fade. One night, as the wind howled across the valley, Seelen, the same engineer who had sent the original SOS, was brought to the human camp. She was weak but alive. When Mara saw her, she felt tears rise in her eyes. This was the voice that had traveled across the stars. Seelen smiled faintly, her voice barely audible. "You came," she said. "We almost stopped believing." Mara took her hand and said gently, "You didn't stop believing, and that's why we found you." That night, under the cracked sky, humans and Valari sat together around small lights, sharing stories in broken translations. The humans told tales of Earth, of rain, oceans, and forests full of life. The Valari spoke of their lost crystal cities, their songs that once filled the sky, and though they came from different worlds, they felt something in common, the deep understanding of loss and the hope of starting again. In the following days, the humans discovered more survivors in far regions. Some were hiding in frozen caves, others under collapsed towers. Every rescue became a miracle. Each time a new group was found, cheers echoed through the communication channels. Humanity had never felt prouder. From orbit, the rest of the galaxy watched. Drones from alien observers recorded everything. The Deathworlders landing, helping, healing. The images spread across networks faster than light. Civilizations that once feared humans now saw something different. Not monsters of war, but beings with hearts large enough to cross galaxies for strangers. As days turned into weeks, the Volari began to recover. Their bodies grew stronger. Children laughed again. And every night when the stars appeared, they looked up and whispered thanks to the skies. For humanity, it was more than a mission. It was a reminder of who they were meant to be. They had come as warriors but stayed as healers. In the middle of death and dust, they brought life again. And though the galaxy still called them Deathworlders, the Volari gave them a new name, the Guardians of the Sky. It was the beginning of a bond that would change the fate of both worlds forever. The Volari homeworld had been reduced to silent ashes. Once a green and bright world full of oceans and silver cities, it now floated in darkness, covered with smoke and ruins. The survivors were very few, lost among the stars, broken and hunted. Their people had cried out for help, sending a final SOS into space, hoping anyone would hear. But they never expected that the ones who would answer were the Deathworlders, the humans. When the humans arrived, they did not come with songs or banners. Their ships appeared like shadows between stars, huge and strong, silent and watchful. For the Volari, it was a strange sight. The beings whom the galaxy called Deathworlders had answered their cry. The Volari had heard stories about humans, stories full of fear, violence, and chaos. The galaxy said humans were too wild to live among civilized species. They came from a world full of storms, predators, and diseases, a death world that shaped them into survivors like no other. But now those same survivors had come to protect them. Commander Alara stood on the bridge of the human flagship Vanguard. Her eyes were cold but full of focus as she looked at the destroyed planet. "This is no rescue mission," she said quietly. "This is a promise." Her second-in-command, Captain Hayes, nodded. The message said they were being hunted by the Krith Dominion. "Those bastards don't leave witnesses." Alara's jaw tightened. "Then we make sure they leave none of us either." Down below in the cargo bay, the rescued Volari watched the humans move. They were taller, stronger, and louder than any species they had seen before. Their faces showed no fear. Their armor looked like something forged from fire itself. Some of the Volari children hid behind their elders, but one small boy, Liran, stared in wide-eyed wonder. He whispered to his mother, "Are they gods?" She smiled sadly and said, "No, my son. They are what gods send when the universe forgets mercy." The humans began rebuilding what they could. They offered food, warmth, and medicine. But more than that, they offered something that the Volari had forgotten: safety. The soldiers guarded the refugees, building shelters on the nearby moon that had been half terraformed. It wasn't perfect, but it could be home. Every night, under the pale glow of alien skies, the Volari could see human engineers working through the darkness, repairing ships, setting up power grids, and digging wells. Ilara often walked among the Volari, listening to their stories. She learned about the attack, the fall of their cities, and the slaughter that followed. Each word made her blood burn hotter. "They targeted the children first," one elder whispered, trembling. "They said the young ones carry the future, so they destroyed the future." Ilara said nothing, but the next day she ordered every ship in her fleet to prepare for retaliation. Meanwhile, the rest of the galaxy watched in silence. No one dared to challenge the Krith Dominion. They were too powerful, too cruel, too many. But when word spread that humans had entered the conflict, the stars seemed to hold their breath. Many species whispered that the Deathworlders were insane to fight such an enemy. Others whispered something else, that maybe, just maybe, the balance of fear in the galaxy was finally changing. Back on the moon, the Volari began to rebuild their hope. Human children and Volari children started to play together near the base camps. They laughed, shared food, and learned words from each other's languages. It was a small sign, but to both species it meant something huge. That survival was no longer just about fighting, but about connecting. Liran, the curious Volari boy, had become friends with a young human technician named Maya. She showed him how to fix small drones and use simple machines. In return, he told her stories of the old Volari cities and their crystal gardens. One evening, as they sat watching the stars, Liran asked, "Why did your people come?" "You didn't know us." Maya smiled softly. "Because we know what it's like to scream for help and hear nothing back." This time, we answered. The peace did not last long. One night, the early warning alarm screamed across the moon base. The Krith had found them. Their fleet appeared on the scanners like a dark tide, massive warships full of hate. Ilara stood in front of the command screen, her expression hard as steel. So, she said calmly, they came to finish what they started. The humans moved fast. Ships took positions, defense grids powered up, and soldiers rushed to the bunkers. But instead of fear, the air was full of determination. Even the Valari refused to hide. Many volunteered to help, carrying supplies, repairing shields, anything they could do. When the Krith ships entered orbit, the first shots were fired. The sky above the moon burned with light. Human and Krith warships clashed in a storm of plasma and metal. Explosions painted the stars. The moon shook under the impact of orbital strikes. But the humans didn't break. They fought like creatures born for war. They fought as if protecting the Valari was the only thing that mattered in the universe. Alara's voice echoed through the comms. Hold the line. Every inch they take, we take back with fire. On the surface, Maya and Liren hid inside a shelter, watching the sky burn. He whispered, trembling, Will they win? Maya put her hand on his shoulder and said, We don't lose, Liren. We endure. Hours passed. The human ships were damaged, some destroyed, but their defense was unbroken. The Krith commander, enraged, ordered his fleet to descend closer. It was a mistake. When they entered the lower orbit, the Vanguard unleashed its full arsenal. A wave of energy cannons and missiles cut through the darkness, striking the enemy flagship. The explosion was so massive that the light was seen even from the surface. When the dust settled, silence fell again over the stars. The Krith fleet was retreating, broken and scattered. The humans had won, not just a battle, but something much greater. They had shown the galaxy that the Deathworlders were not monsters to be feared, but guardians to be respected. After the battle, Alara stood before the Valari survivors. You are safe now, she said. The Krith will not come again. Not while humanity stands. Tears filled many eyes. The Valari elder stepped forward and said, We have no world left, but you have given us hope. Let this moon be our new beginning. The humans helped them terraform the moon fully. Together they planted the first trees and built homes. Over time, the once barren land turned green. They named it Nova Velar, meaning new life. For the Valari, it was a second chance. For the humans, it was a promise kept. In the years that followed, stories of that alliance spread across the stars. They called it the day the Deathworlders answered. To the galaxy, it became a legend. To the Valari, it became their salvation. And to the humans, it became proof that even in a universe full of darkness, sometimes the most dangerous species could also be the most compassionate. As the sun rose over Nova Velar for the first time, Liren and Maya stood on a hill watching the light touch the horizon. The war was over, but their friendship, and the bond between their people, was just beginning, and far above them, among the quiet stars, the old SOS signal still echoed faintly, bouncing between forgotten systems. Not as a cry for help anymore, but as a reminder. A reminder that once, when the universe called for mercy, the Deathworlders heard it, and they answered. Years passed since the great battle that saved the Valari. The moon, once empty and silent, had now become alive. Rivers flowed through green valleys, silver towers rose in the sunlight, and children from two different species played side by side under the same sky. The humans and Valari had built something together that neither could have done alone. A new home, a shared destiny, and a peace born from fire. Commander Alara, now Admiral Alara, often visited Nova Velar. The Valari welcomed her as one of their own. They called her the Iron Soul, a name that spoke of her courage and her heart. She never saw herself as a hero. For her, it was simple. She had answered a call that no one else dared to. We did what was right, she would say. Nothing more, nothing less. But deep inside, she knew that moment had changed everything. Humanity was no longer seen as just the Deathworlders. They had become protectors, builders, and allies. Nova Velar grew quickly. The humans helped the Valari set up schools, hospitals, and training centers. Together, they built starports and small defense fleets, so that the Valari would never again be helpless. Many young Valari even joined the human navy, determined to protect others just as the humans had protected them. Among them was a familiar face, Liren, the same boy who once hid behind his mother during the first rescue. He had grown tall, strong, and full of courage. The spark of wonder that once shone in his eyes was now the fire of purpose. When he stood before the enlistment board, he said only one line. The Deathworlders heard us once. Now it's my turn to hear others. His words moved everyone in the room. Maya, his childhood friend, was there too, now a full engineer working on interplanetary communication systems. Together, they promised to keep the message of hope alive. But peace in the galaxy was never simple. The fall of the Krith Dominion had created a power vacuum. Small warlords and pirate groups began rising in the outer systems. Many feared that history would repeat itself, that another empire would rise from the ashes of the last. The Galactic Council tried to keep order, but without unity their voice was weak. It was humanity and the Valari who took the lead in forming a new alliance, the Concord of Worlds. This Concord was not built on power or fear, but on trust. It welcomed any species that believed in helping others. Ilara was chosen as the first fleet marshal of the Concord Defense Force, while the Valari Elder became the first speaker of the council. The two stood side by side during the founding ceremony. "Let this alliance stand as proof," the Elder said. "That compassion can be stronger than conquest." The entire hall echoed with applause that night, and for the first time in galactic history, hope felt real. However, not everyone celebrated. In the dark corners of space, remnants of the Krith Dominion plotted their revenge. They whispered of vengeance and blood, waiting for a chance to strike. Their hatred burned quietly, growing like poison. One of their commanders, known as Vrackle, swore that the Deathworlders and their pets would one day pay. He began building a secret fleet, hidden deep inside a nebula where no signals escaped. Meanwhile, life on Nova Velar continued with peace and progress. Liran and Maya worked together on a new kind of communication array, a beacon that could reach across galaxies, stronger than any SOS signal before. "If someone cries for help," Maya said, "we'll make sure no one ever has to wait in silence again." Liran smiled. That's what this world stands for. Their friendship had grown into something deeper over the years. They spent evenings watching the stars just like they did when they were children. Sometimes Liran would tell her about his dreams, to explore new systems, to carry the message of the conquered to forgotten worlds. Maya, ever the dreamer, said she wanted to build bridges between stars, not just through machines but through hearts. One day, as they were testing the beacon, something unexpected happened. A faint signal appeared on the screen, broken, weak, but familiar. It was an SOS, not from their galaxy but from far beyond known space. The room went silent as the message decoded. The words were simple, desperate, and chilling. "We are dying. Please, anyone, help us." Liran froze. It was like history repeating itself, the same echo, the same cry. He turned to Maya. "We have to tell the council." Within hours, the news spread. The conquered council gathered, and Admiral Ilara was among the first to speak. "We know this call," she said firmly. "We once were the ones who answered. We can't turn away now." Some members argued that it was too risky, that they didn't even know who was sending the message. But Ilara's voice silenced the room. "Risk," she said, "is what makes us who we are." The Deathworlders answered once. The Valari rebuilt because of it. This alliance was born from that choice. If we turn away now, then everything we built means nothing. The council voted. The result was clear: they would answer. Humanity and Valari engineers began building a deep space exploration fleet. The mission was called Echo 1. Liran and Maya were both chosen to join it. It was dangerous, perhaps a one-way journey, but neither hesitated. "It's what we're meant to do," Maya told him. He nodded, looking out at the stars. "Let's go hear the next voice." As the Echo 1 fleet prepared to launch, the galaxy watched in awe. The ships were magnificent, sleek, strong, and filled with hope. On the day of departure, Admiral Ilara gave her last speech before retirement. "Once," she said, "we were feared for our strength. Then we were respected for our courage. But today, we are remembered for our compassion. May this fleet carry that light where no one has gone before." When the engines ignited, the ships rose slowly, leaving trails of light behind. On the surface, thousands watched, humans, Valari, and members of other allied species. Children waved, elders prayed, and somewhere in the crowd the old Valari elder whispered softly, "May the echo never fade." Days turned into weeks as Echo 1 traveled beyond mapped space. The stars became unfamiliar, the void deeper. The SOS signal grew stronger, guiding them like a faint heartbeat. Liran stood at the observation deck, staring into the endless dark. "Do you ever wonder," he asked Maya, "what kind of world we'll find?" She smiled. "Maybe one that needs us as much as we once needed them." But not everything was peaceful. As they followed the signal, strange readings began appearing on their sensors. Traces of ships, energy trails, and debris. It was as if someone else had also heard the signal. Liren frowned. We're not alone out here. Soon they discovered a fleet ahead, unknown and unmarked, and among them were Krith warships. Somehow the remnants of the old Dominion had followed them. A transmission came through. Vrackel's voice echoed through the speakers. "Deathworlders," he hissed. "Still pretending to be saviors? You bring your light where it doesn't belong. Now I will finish what my kind started." The tension filled the air. Liren turned to Maya. "Looks like history isn't done testing us." She grinned faintly. "Then let's show them what we learned." The battle that followed was fierce, fought in the cold dark between galaxies. The humans and Valari fought side by side once again, just as their ancestors had. Missiles lit up the void, shields shimmered, and ships danced through fire. It was chaos and beauty combined. In the end, the Concord fleet triumphed. The Krith were finally destroyed, their hatred ending in silence. But as the last enemy ship exploded, the mysterious SOS signal suddenly became clear. A voice spoke, gentle, trembling, full of hope. To whoever answered, "Thank you. You are not just our rescuers. You are our light." Tears filled Liren's eyes. Maya smiled through exhaustion. "We heard them," she whispered. "We really did." When they finally reached the origin of the signal, they found a dying world, but also survivors waiting, just as the Valari once had. And so the cycle continued. The rescued became rescuers. The echo of mercy traveled onward through time and stars. Back on Nova Valar, Admiral Alara received a message confirming success. She looked up at the night sky, full of constellations that told stories of war, loss, and hope. "And so it begins again," she murmured. The echo that never ends. And somewhere in the vast silence of the universe, another SOS signal faded into light, not as a cry for help, but as a symbol of what it meant to be truly alive. Humanity had proved once and for all that even the fiercest warriors of the death world could have the kindest hearts, and that when compassion answers the call of despair, history is made all over again.